All right. I think we're ready to get started here. The last panel between now and social hour. No pressure.
We're all
Tim,
heavy drinkers, so that's
well, Tim Soderholm. I'm going to moderate the Chief Information Security Officer panel here to wrap us out today. I'm going to set the stage a little bit before we get into introductions. After talking to the CISOs, they all wanted to start a little bit differently and hear from what's on your minds. So instead of waiting until the end and starting questions, we're going to start questions at the beginning. So while we're working through our introductions, be thinking about the questions, what you might want to ask a CISO, get inside the mind of a CISO, or share what's on your minds. A story was shared with us that in a setting like this, hearing from an audience has impacted them and had takeaways that they hadn't considered and went back and used that information on their own. So what's on your mind? What would you like to hear? And then I do have some prepared questions that we can work through in the event that you have no questions for these three CISOs. So Tim Soderholm, I'm currently with Principal Financial Group. My first 18 years was with Wells Fargo, starting in sales and then building departments. At Principal, I came in as the Chief Risk Officer for the Retirement and Income Solutions Division, and then about a year into that, we decided to buy a chunk of Wells Fargo, their institutional retirement and trust business. So I helped facilitate that transaction and then get the business up and running. And in 2023, I went into an enterprise role where I now have our corporate insurance programs, a technology risk team, and then I oversee our GRC technology tooling and frameworks. Russ, we'll start with you.
Sure. So I'm currently the CISO over at Principal, work with Tim. I've been there, I'm like 4.5 months now, 5 months, something like that. Before that, I was the Deputy CISO over at Equifax. I was also the interim CISO during the time of the breach. If you look up the 2017 breach, that's fun times for me. Before that, I actually was leading security and IT teams for a startup that we sold to Equifax. Before that, a couple of startups. Before that, Harris, which is a defense contractor. Don't look it up, it'll mess up your browsing history. But all during that time, what we've been running into from the security space has always been a drive for me, and it's been a pull. I'm interested in protecting people, and I know you're gonna drink later, so I'm trying to protect you from getting there too soon.
Andy Neller, I am the Deputy CISO and HIPAA security official at Walmart Blue Cross Blue Shield. Been there now for 23 years. Started there as a security architect, actually like the security architect at the time, and just kind of worked through over time. Reason I've been there as long as I have, and I imagine if you're in Iowa, you most likely have Blue Cross Blue Shield insurance. And when I got to the company, it sounded too good to be true when they started talking about how they're a mutual company, and everything kind of was like driven by the membership North Star of whether it's healthy state, lower cost, like cybersecurity. What are we doing to protect our members' data and make that experience better for them? And they really lead that by example. And so I've been there. That's why I've been there as long as I have, because I'm protecting my neighbor's data. I'm protecting my data. I'm protecting Iowa's and South Dakota's data, and helping to kind of help shape healthcare and what we need to do for that data protection. So it's been very fulfilling to work for a company when you start getting into the conversations with executive leadership, and they're just always with, well, how is this going to affect healthy outcomes for what we're trying to do as a healthier state or to ensure in the state long term. So really appreciate working here. Glad to come to this conference because I really feel that these types of events and the networking and getting to talk to these fine folks here, that's how we make things better in healthcare overall and kind of move that needle. So
Collaboration.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jake Gibson, F&G. I've been with that company for about 6.5 years. This is my second opportunity to take on the role as a CISO. The first time was with a cloud and data center provider here locally. So I've kind of seen both sides of the equation, partner, provider, and also industry. But I've been in technology for going on 30 years, and it's kind of been an interesting journey to see how cyber was not a thing, and now it's huge. And seeing all the other conversations today, hearing all of the different continuities that are happening throughout the different topics, it's consistent. Like cyber's top of mind for a lot of people. So again, thank you for having me.
Cyber is top of mind for a lot of people, so what's on your minds? So with a hand, and we'll run a mic. We'll start there.
It's me again. So in regards to kind of like technical breaches or just any technological problems, how do you guys or your company or your team build a safe environment for your employees or for your peers to report mistakes instead of hiding them in fear?
Oh, yeah.
I can kick that off, I think, because right now we're in the midst of our Cybersecurity Awareness Week. And so you talk about like creating safe spaces and having that trust. And that's something that you build over time. And so for us, as we've matured our security program and then reaching out to our workforce, it's not about like the gotcha, look, you clicked on a phishing email. It's about having the conversations about how they become secure at work and at home and how you kind of raise the tide of all ships and communicate that out. And there's not, like you're saying, there isn't going to be consequences if they do something, but it's how you work through those with the individuals and make that something that's trainable. And again, setting a positive example so it is a safe space. So, they feel like, oh no, I did this thing I maybe shouldn't have. I clicked on this phishing email. But they know to reach out to our like cyber response mailbox that we have, because they understand the quicker they can report that, the quicker we can take action to do something about that. And then maybe put a control in place or work with them on, make it easier for them to make better decisions in the future. Because I truly believe that people want to make good decisions. They may not just be armed with the information they need at the time. And so we meet with them like day one in new employee orientation, setting that bar to here's where you need to go if you have questions. There's no penalties. This is have that conversation with us. And we're your partner to ensure you have that safe working environment, that digital safety net, as it were. And you build that over time in the organization to get that reputation. So you're not just you're not the cops, you're not the police of no, you're that true enablement and helping them to succeed not only in their career, but overall in an ecosystem. But you build that over time as a reputation, in my opinion.
Maybe a short addition to that. I love the adopting a approachable culture, I think is the key to Andy's message there. But also encouraging people to participate in the process, build your partnerships within the business, help them understand the implications of the solutions or the problems that they're identifying, and show the actual outcomes from those solutions. So I think seeing the reward with the risk kind of helps tie it together.
And I would say certainly plus and, go ahead and do the improv up here. One of the things that you can do, certainly had good success out of calling to attention in a forum that's not in cybersecurity, a savings that someone made. They may have protected from fraud. Somebody was trying to come in and get a hold of someone's account, and you call that person out and hold them up as an exemplar of what you should do. Back to the point of making sure that you're doing that often. I think the more that you do that, the more that people understand it's a cultural dynamic and it's okay for them to speak up. There's a slight problem on the click-throughs. That's one of the troubles that you'll have. Yes, I can commend everybody for doing a good job, but it's tough to say, and here's the person that clicked on the worst link in the history of all of our things. That one's a little tougher to do. But one of the techniques you can do there is to say, was there a distance between them noticing, reporting, identifying, or greatest improved? So you can still do that, where you could say, this person, once they became aware of the trouble, is now much better than they were before. All those things, I'm generally more of a carrot guy, which is a little strange because I'm usually the one brought in during breaches. But that's because if the person clicked on the link and they realized it was a problem, they're probably feeling worse than you could ever possibly make them feel anyway. And so now you need to help them understand everybody's done that. If it's written well, I'll probably click on it too. I mean, I'll blame Andy, but I will probably do it too. So I would go most of the way towards carrot and then leave the stick for last.
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up because that's a phenomenal, that's so critically important of those successes and where you can celebrate those successes with the organization back to improving that culture and relationship, because it's not all about, here's our click-through percentage, here's who did these different things here, but in any type of gamification, because that's one of the things that as we kept moving the needle on like the metrics we tried to improve on like reporting things to our cyber response, when you had the metrics and conversations and like, oh, can we reward the people that are exemplifying that and holding those up? So it's more, I agree, more carrot, less stick. that again, building that relationship with the business.
So who else has another question? And while we're passing the mic, the phishing tests aren't intended to be easy, right? The easy ones don't make it through. So you have to also find a way to be a human, right? When you have a really, really, really good test that executives also fail, then your phishing testing program is doing its job.
Nice.
Hi guys, thanks so much for being here today. I like to think in the optimistic side of technology as well. And so I want to know what excites you most about technology, especially as it relates to your customers' experience.
I have a couple. Certainly, one of the journeys that I've gone on in the past year is moving to a passwordless experience. And so maintaining a great identity without having to remember a password changed so many of the aspects of the experience. Now, again, we began that journey with the idea that we were seeing some compromises that had knowledge-based authentication problems. We had some MFA problems. So we were trying to solve it from a security lens, but the very first thing that we noticed, and we were definitely concerned about how people were going to react, because we were like, there's not going to be a place where they can reset their password. As soon as you say the passwords are gone, then, half your security team's going to pitchforks and torches. And so we were really concerned about that. And then the other half, we were thinking about the users being up in arms. The reality was everything was flipped from what we had initially expected, because the experience is so good and so seamless, because you still have SSO relationships and things on the back that, if you get your device and you biometric with the device, just about all the common devices today, all that is local to the device. It doesn't go anywhere else. And so that's super secure. Then you can say for the person, hey, by the way, there's no password. You're not sending over the wire. The attacker can't take your password. All of those things made the experience so great. That is kind of where I tilt my bend on AI these days as well, is had we looked at that from a slightly different angle, we probably would have approached that journey, a year before. Technology would have had to have caught up a little. But I think what we're seeing today is a lot more usability and a lot more security, kind of in one technique or technology. And that's something we haven't seen in a really long time. So I'm super hopeful about that.
I like that, because I couldn't agree more. It's nice to see where technology is going to enable what you can do to make things less, reduce the friction. So the unnecessary friction in these experiences, and that's one thing that I know from personal experience, whether it's like we're doing for security awareness or working with our customers, providers, is my relationship and having relationships with other organizations, like marketing. That's something that they know how to interface with people and how to remove some of that friction and that user experience, and how you marry that with the cybersecurity aspect of it, so that way it's not a choice between one or the other, but you get to have both. And whether it's artificial intelligence or like passkeys, things you're getting into now, there's opportunities for us to embrace this, to again make things better and more secure for the people we're interacting with. And technology, as it's advancing, whether it's artificial intelligence or you name it, it's an exciting time to kind of get into where you can leverage these things to really get a win-win for both the business and your consumers.
Yeah, I thank you for that question, because I think that's kind of lost on we as cybersecurity professionals. It's always the scary stuff, but but on the other side of that, there's the whole enablement side. So for me, it's the convergence of a tech-savvy talent force that's really prevalent today that wasn't when I entered the workforce. So we've got these new ideas and it just sparks entering, and we're able to solve things a lot faster because those ideas are generated immediately. We don't have to teach the technology, they already have that base.
I mean, if you think about it from back in the day, I'm not going to say how old we are, because that's probably going to be a problem. We will comment on the hair, I'm sure, at some point. Initially, when we were going to roll out something that said it was a device that you had, it was something that you knew, we would have to get these keys produced in a factory somewhere that we could guarantee consistency on the cryptographics. We had to know so much about the company producing those keys, and then so much about when someone lost them. I mean, it's insane what we were having to do that right now is totally available on everybody in this room. They always carry it around. As soon as they leave that phone somewhere, they start itching.
And assume they already know how to use
They
that.
already know how to use
Yeah,
that.
exactly. Yeah.
So it's great. I'm looking really forward to it.
So that was great. That was kind of opportunity, right? And so risk and opportunity. So and AI, thank goodness it finally came up today, because I thought we were going to get through all of our sessions with no AI.
Yeah, that's right.
How is AI from an opportunity in improving our defensive posture? How does that feel to you versus threat actors using AI? It feels like an arms race.
I've got an analogy for this. So I was thinking about this last night a little bit. Do any of you have friends that have campers and trucks? They get a bigger camper, and then they gotta have a bigger truck, and then they get a bigger camper, and then they get a bigger truck. It's the same philosophy, right? I mean, the adversaries are increasing their capabilities. At the same time, we are kind of playing cat and mouse a little bit as well. So the game is there, like it always has been. It's just evolving.
And I would say, when you look at how an adversary is going to gain access to a technology, the difference in why it is freaking some of the people in the security field out is it makes people of average capability exceptional. Whereas we would have had some people fairly steeped in technology and understanding particular strategies of an architecture that they had to get in and know. So maybe they were a network engineer. They had to develop some amount of skill set in order to compromise these devices. AI levels the playing field in a way that we haven't seen before, because it makes a person that is not that skilled be able to approach one of these devices with 0 days or even close to 0 days, because it can find vulnerabilities you hadn't thought of. What's always happened in the defensive space, which makes this a little different now, is by the time the vendors make the tools and get it back out to us for us to be able to use to defend, the gap is getting wider. It's always been there. We've always been in an arms race. Figure out how to pick a lock. We try to figure out how to make a better lock. We make a better lock, pick a lock. But the distance between that is getting a little wider, because the vendors have to learn the technique that the attackers are doing, provide tools that compensate for it, and then get back out to us. Here's where technology is another big win, because if our folks get involved in the technology, that leveling sort of enables a lot more red teaming in our fields than we had before. And so you get a broader technology base available to you, so they'll be able to look at a lot more problems inside your own space. So I'd say it's going to be out of whack for a little while. Don't tell the attackers this. But we'll be able to catch back up pretty quickly, and once we do, I think the arms race actually will shrink in terms of its time, but the arms race will always exist.
So someone go just a little bit deeper in the event that students aren't familiar with red teaming. So let's pull on that thread just a little bit.
Sure. So when you take a group who's protecting and you kind of label them, we would typically say the group that's trying to protect you is a blue team, and the group that's trying to not protect you and take something away from you or take your stuff or break in or whatever, we call those red teamers. And red teamers are trying to express parts of your environment's vulnerabilities, weaknesses, identify those, and if done correctly, make the CISO's job a little easier. If done incorrectly, it makes our heads go bald, because they identify lots of problems that we weren't aware of, and you have a sense that everything was fine, and then all of a sudden he goes, I broke in, and look at all the stuff I took. That is a fundamental component of most cyber programs. You're going to need somebody constantly walking around trying to jiggle your lock and see if it's going to open, try to break in as best they can.
I'll tell you, that concept really excited my son. He wanted to be a professional hacker for a good company. So said differently, it's kind of like we employ people within our own company to attack ourselves.
Totally.
While we're teaching our other side, our blue team, how to protect ourselves. So the better internal hackers we have that are equipped and like the external hackers, the better internally we'll be. But it's safe fire.
That's right.
It's games, right?
Yeah, it's all in the kitchen, right? So we're all talking to each other, right? Don't let it get out to the customers.
What other questions do we have?
Microphone's down.
Oh. I think you win the prize this year.
I'm just very curious about everything. So since I'm kind of unfamiliar with like the technology field or side of business, basic question this time. What does success look like for your team and for your role? How do you measure that? And how do you reward yourself?
That is a great question.
Yeah, you're good at this.
I don't know, for me,
Yeah, go ahead.
As we get into, back to what I mentioned, like removing the friction or finding a process and how we're making that better. So whether it's artificial intelligence, I know we talked about there, it's not great at everything, but there's certain things it's very good at. So for one of the things that we mentioned, like red teaming. So our developers, they were struggling with certain classes of bugs that the red teamers just kept finding. One thing we found, it wasn't because they were like trying to introduce these, but they're hard. And some of these classes of bugs, this is things where AI can remove those things out of there. For example, we have a library we use for authentication. And we found that part of what kept coming up from our red teamers when they were testing it was, well, they were including the wrong library, or someone just slightly tweaked it. It wasn't quite right. Well, as we started using like artificial intelligence to kind of assist them as they're coding it, when they started referencing the wrong library, AI was like, whoa, hold up, did you really mean to do that? Because everyone else is using this library right here. Are you sure you want to do that? I'm like, oh, no, I meant to use that one. And so again, it reduces their time to produce secure code and removing that friction. So for us, it's good feedback because on the one hand, again, we're not having to then fix a vulnerability on the far side after it's made it into production. So everyone's happy there. We're not spending also our time and money red teaming it to find those things. The developers are producing more code quickly, and so they're happy. And so it's finding those opportunities to win-win from security, and that's very fulfilling to me.
I think it also goes back to your first question. I think success comes in a lot of the culture that we impart in the organization. So rewarding to me, how I feel rewarded is when that person does come up and say, hey, I think I found something. I think we win at that moment. And then aside from that, it's always a matter of if, not when. You hear that in this industry a lot. At the end of the day, we are risk professionals. And there's a balance between investment and reward. And so we have to kind of find that balance, and it comes from partnerships and other people in your organization, understanding and appreciating what you're doing and is it enough. We have partners all across the organization that we work with to find that right balance.
And I would say if you're looking at it from the context of, are you a business person, you mean? And so you're one, yeah, okay, so if you're a business person, the way that you could see whether or not your program is effective, there is some technical ways. You could look at maturity assessments. You can get independent sort of assessments of your program from people who specialize in this. That's one way to do it. The way that I would typically do it, though, is I would say, are you able to execute your business, whatever the business reality is, if you're selling bagels, if you're selling insurance policies, or whatever it is, are you able to do business safely? And that's really what motivates me. To the point that you just made, in one of the businesses I was in, we were attacked by the Chinese military. If you don't know, China's very good at this. We don't have the United States military protecting us in this space. It's us. Or not us, it's our teams. But if you put yourself in that frame of mind, it could be sort of demotivating because you're like, what chance do I have against a nation state? Well, the reality is actually you have a lot of chance, because back to the thing we were talking about, even if you go back to the Equifax breach, one individual, one person in that company could have prevented the breach. Every single person that was employed. We had to figure that out much later, but had we done some particular things, anybody would have been able to shunt part of that attack. And so the motivation that I have and the reward that I get is being able to help people like you do business in a way that, if I've done it right, you don't necessarily have to think about security too much because it's helping you be in a safe environment. You're not in a giant bubble, of course, rolling around the floor. You do have to take some steps to protect things. But I think the more that we can help you do your business in the corridor of guideposts that are safe, the better I feel. I feel worse when it goes the other way, where I've got to say, no, that you don't do that.
Also, I think making cyber less scary, because like you mentioned, like nation states. I mean, these are scary topics we deal with, and when you start exposing, you want the workforce to be aware, people to be aware of the threats that they're facing. Back to at the end of the day, it's all about risk, but you don't want them walking away with just paralyzed by fear. So, how can you have those conversations, like you mentioned, whether you're selling bagels or insurance, doing that safely and help enabling them, and then having those right conversations? Back to I'd mentioned earlier about being that partner. So if they have questions, if they see something, where to go, being that, that outreach for them to help them succeed, and like you mentioned earlier, creating that safe space for them to do so. And back to that carrot versus stick, I mean, that's critically important.
I get the one soapbox thing, right? If you see some kind of ad somewhere, or you see an article or whatever that's clickbait, it's like, oh my God, don't click on this thing, Android has a horrible thing, and your phone's gonna get popped. They're trying to get you to click on stuff 9 times out of 10. And so while it's okay from the awareness perspective, I would want people to know that you don't necessarily want to click on random links. It's also, there are steps you can take to protect yourself and your family and everybody else, and you can make it very difficult for any adversary to get your stuff. So the part that I would take away is not only is it risk-based, but there are absolutely steps you can take that would make it very difficult for a nation state or anyone else to get your stuff.
So we are going to ask more questions, but I have one. It felt like yesterday this AI thing was going to come up, and maybe it was 3 to 5 years, right? It's this emerging risk, and now it's mainstream. It's music, it's photos, it's occupying all of our panels. The quantum computing is creeping into it's this next thing, it's this emerging thing. It's not going to be here for a while. Talk to us a little bit. I guess first, maybe somebody do a Cliff Notes version of quantum computing, and then give us a little overview of what it is. I've heard examples of, think of a light bulb as current day computing and the sun as quantum. I'm like, come on. Right? I've heard we can take an 11-hour model down to 11 seconds. Maybe that's more like it. But what's quantum computing, and how is that occupying your mind? What risk does it, you mentioned encryption, what does that bring into play in the emerging risk space?
Okay, so you obviously pulled my chain as the cryptography stuff I did earlier.
That's right.
And here's the way that I would frame it. The reason quantum matters so much in encryption, it simply has to do with the fact that most of our encryption is based on factoring large primes. I mean, that's effectively it. And then quantum computing gives you the ability to do lots of computations simultaneously. Now, what it also mentions is kind of like the movie in Seabiscuit or whatever. Yeah, it goes in all directions really fast, but it goes in all directions. So it's very difficult to keep it under control. That's why you lose a lot of information as you're trying to coalesce these bits into information. So we're not quite there. I think the concern for all of us in the crypto field is we simply built the algorithms with the expectation that there was kind of going to be a linear relationship that we'd be able to follow. And what happens in this step change that occurs in quantum computing is, if it works at all, it's so much faster and paralyzes, can run things in parallel. It paralyzes so many of the operations. It changes the infrastructure in a way that's very difficult. Now, when you think about that infrastructure, the concern that I both have a hope and a concern. Technology is going to save us in one way, and it's also scary in the other. That is, when you go through the key infrastructure that we all depend on to protect everybody's information, it is not currently configured to blanket replace every algorithmic and cryptographic cipher simultaneously. It has no corresponding mechanism to do that. And so that's really where the worry comes from. You will have the ability to crack these keys pretty quickly, and then we would need to roll out new algorithms, ciphers, and the rest, and we couldn't do it. On the plus side, the way Google makes money is by doing that. They'll fix it. So that's the part that I would say is the Microsofts, the Googles, the AWSs, they realize that. They're working on it. NIST is working on it. So I'm confident we'll get that part figured out. But for those of us that are in the business of blue teaming things to protect, we're going to have to make sure that our algorithms are quantum safe. And that is very small as a percentage of cryptographic standards we have at the moment. I don't know if that helps, but.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to the camper and truck analogy, right? As that progresses, we will progress as well. And this is not an immediate thing either. I just want to double down on what Russ was saying there. This is forecast years in the future, but I like talking about emerging risk because if we talk about it now, we can educate ourselves and we can plan and for the future.
Well, and I think, like you mentioned, as we get into understanding, where those gaps are, so it's not like throw your hands up, we're just doomed. You can start taking inventory of where you have maybe non-cryptographically safe algorithms, and then finding where your key vendor weaknesses, not probably going to be your AWSs or your Googles or Microsofts, but where are other vendors or opportunities where we can at least get an inventory. Not saying you swap all this out day one, but you start understanding, where your assets are, where your things may need to be, or your critical gaps may be once you start actualizing those risks. So you're not just throwing your hands up, there's nothing we can do. When you have the conversation with the board or whoever, cares about this aspect in your organization, you can at least, go, well, this is what our exposure may look like as we start, moving that forward or moving that ball towards where that's, realizing that quantum computing risk.
I think the struggle we will have, of course, and we got to acknowledge this, the nation states will likely have it before we're told about it. So that is likely true. No one is going to raise their, I don't think, no one's going to raise their hand and say, we've figured out how to break everybody's keys, yay. They're not going to do that. So there is a space in there for risk to live, but I don't believe that it's going to be very far off before we start getting some quantum safe ciphers, and that will start to bleed through the ecosystem a lot faster than we think.
And I'm guessing if and when a nation state has it, while they won't raise their hand and tell somebody, they're going to use it pretty fast and it'll become very aware very quickly, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I think there's an added layer to that. If they have it, they won't tell us, and that's the harvest now, decrypt later. So there is a little bit of siphoning risk now that might be happening, that they're sitting on a vast amount of data and just waiting for the decryption capabilities down the road.
So
As a person that was helping with lots of breaches, though, they probably already have it.
Oh, they do.
So
Yeah.
So I'm going to translate that for me. So our data that we have today and systems and tools are encrypted. That's the easy word, right? And it's encrypted based upon today's technology. Mm-hmm. Quantum will break all of that overnight, right? Because it can it would take us billions of years to break it today with our current computing power, but the next computing power will break it overnight. Mm-hmm. All of the data that we've lost, but that has been lost, and it's out there, but we're like, oh, whew, it's encrypted, right?
Right.
They're sitting on it and holding it, right? Because they know with the technology improvement curve, at some point, we're going to be able to break this. Mm. And now you can go back to all your previous lost data and break it, right? So they might sit on it for a while and just keep collecting the data.
That's right.
So that they have more of it before. They might up their game to get more of it to allow them to break more. Yeah, boy.
Well, as you get into also, what's the meme of the, if you win the lottery, I'm not going to tell anyone, but there'll be signs. You got to think that at some point, like, how did they get that? Well, did they, mm-hmm. cross that threshold? So mm-hmm. keep a watchful eye on the horizon.
Mm-hmm. How about from the crowd again? Another question. Yes.
Question?
This is a more technical question as well. To what extent do you think zero knowledge protocols and zero knowledge verification can play a role in cybersecurity?
I guess that depends on where it is. Do you mean like an identity space? So pick something about you specifically that I know, then make sure that I don't have to have any knowledge of the interaction. I don't have to know who you are. I don't have to know your social. I don't have to know anything about you, you mean?
Yeah, like the specific protocol in a computer science sense.
Yeah, that's right. So we have a technique, it's probably closest to that. It's not identical, but it's closest to that. It's a zero trust. I'd say it's more philosophy these days, because if you implement too much zero trust, nothing really works that well because nothing can communicate with each other. But the premise behind that is right, which is at every layer, you need to re-authenticate to the other layer. And the less context that is required to exchange, the more you can lock down either context. So I think we're going to probably find that passwordless experience that I was describing, that's pretty much what it was, right? The only thing that we're exchanging with the client and the server is just the fact that it knows that an exchange is happening and a cryptographic key is exchanged. So I think what you'll find in the future is that's going to be the backing store for a lot of our solutions. We're not there yet, but it's certainly a big plus.
I have a question. You mentioned Google will fix it or Google will take care of it.
I was being flippant, but yes.
Yes, just I was going in relationship to quantum computing, but sort of a related issue. We've had yesterday, the other day, the AWS issues.
I didn't notice that. Did you guys?
Oh, yeah.
No? Yes.
How safe are companies relying on single cloud provider for their data? And, speak to that.
Sure. Everybody's going to have a different opinion.
This could take all day.
Yeah.
This is an important topic, but it's an important topic to have with your business to help understand kind of what those thresholds are for tolerances and investment to go along with those tolerances. But I'm going to let these guys answer, and I'll come back to that.
I'll steal from the previous presentation. So just like they talked about the flooding, and you get into what your threshold for risk for these types of events, and to your point on like the business context, what is your resiliency plan? Because cyber, like for us, when I think of our overall incident command, cyber is just an aspect of that. So whether it's tornado, flooding, cybersecurity event, or like for resiliency, it's an overall enterprise risk and how you're planning on what your threshold is for that acceptance of that risk and how you plan for those events that happen. So when AWS had its little moment the other day, we're a big AWS shop, but it didn't completely cripple us because we planned for that business resiliency and not just relying on whether, when we had stuff in our data center, how would we recover from that and have that resiliency of having kind of like active things, or not having that single cloud kind of provider resiliency. It is back into what your business tolerance for risk and what you need for your uptime to fulfill your business objectives. So at the end of the day, it all comes back, I keep going back to risk, but yeah, although I can say personally it was more impactful for me because I couldn't access my Amazon card. But that was just a personal problem there, not a business issue.
And I would say when you look at the statement itself, so if you said, how much should people worry about using a single cloud provider? I'd say probably very little. Like if that's the only thing you're saying. Because there are facilities within all the cloud providers for you to get very high resiliency, certainly higher than you likely would have been able to build yourself in a data center perspective. But what I've seen is most of the outages occur because people are sitting in US East, because that's where the predominant amount of compute is. And they didn't necessarily build their applications to be resilient across East and West, or East and Central, or Central and West, whichever way it is. And I think that gets back to the risk question. If you did multi-clouds, you'd have to write different interfaces, write different application stuff. You have your CI/CD pipelines that likely be different. There's a whole host of things you would do, even if you settled on Kubernetes or something that's shareable. That's going to cost you something. And if that's going to cost you that, you're not going to spend that money on something else, which might be customer experience, other resiliency backups. So I think if you just hit your baseline question of, can I be safe in a single cloud provider? The answer is probably yes. But then you got to look one click deeper at what is your resiliency structure? Are you able to be multi-regioned? And then how much is that going to cost? Are you willing to spend it? And then now you're back to the risk calculation.
Yeah, so back to the tolerances, right? What is your business willing and able to absorb in the event of an outage? And I think we get lost in the cloud quite often, that it is just another data center. It's not dissimilar from when we operate our own data centers. But to Russ's point, they're incredibly resilient. So your likelihood of issues in a single region or a multi-region within a cloud provider are probably less than what we would have had if we had our own traditional data centers at the end. These are really good questions.
Yeah, that's
Ask
a great
your security and IT folks back at the office.
A lot of times security is not even coming up in the conversation of resiliency, but it is. It's one of the topics we have.
Part of it.
Availability is part of what we worry about.
Thank you. I was wondering what aspects of partnering with the enterprise risk management team do you find most beneficial, and what can the risk team bring to the table to help that be most effective?
Ask all the questions. All the questions. Seriously, there are things that we get so hyper-focused on the technology sometimes and the preventions and the detections that we kind of lose the forest through the trees, right? So ask all the questions. We're not afraid of those, and welcome them, because it generates new ideas and new thoughts that we hadn't considered before. The catastrophe conversation was a really good one. Like those are things that we don't always think about, but absolutely could play into cyber events, because weakened senses often lead to threats that we hadn't considered before. They're opportunities for threat actors.
Full disclosure, I'm Russ's ERM.
I was going to say, did Tim plant this?
Mine's sitting down here in the front row.
4 months, 4 weeks?
Yeah, something like that.
I need a pen. Hold on, it takes
Yeah, that's right. So I would echo everything that was mentioned. The credible challenge part is difficult. It might feel difficult because, and I've heard this a bit, you're talking to a very technical person, or in my case, you're talking to an engineer or a red teamer, and so I know this particular way to do this thing. All that means is I know an incantation. That's all it means. I know how to materialize this thing, whatever it is. That's great. But I have no idea what you might be thinking or seeing that I haven't thought of. And so you may feel uncomfortable to talk to me about a challenge to, like, yeah, but Russ, you didn't mention that anybody actually just writes down that you said this was a problem. And it's so simple, and you're like, I'm not going to tell that guy that. I mean, he's talking all this technically gobbledygook about quantum stuff. I'm not going to say, did you make a list? But the number of times that I have seen someone say something like that, and it's a gaping hole in a thing that we needed to fix, because we're so hyper-focused on this little nitnoid thing we're doing, it's disproportionately helpful for you to do credible challenge. So I would say it is vitally important to the work that we do, and whether or not you call it ERM or whether you call it a second line or what you call it, get a quality assurance person that is looking over your shoulder, because I can't see behind mine. I don't know about you. So I need you to look over my shoulder and say, did you see that thing over there?
Well, well, it goes back to that earlier conversation we have of like the safe space. So at the end of the day, whether it's like audit, ERM, whoever you're talking to, you know, I'll go back to our company. I mean, we're all striving towards that end goal of what was best for our membership. And we don't want to do a bad job. We don't want to miss risk. We don't want to cause that impact to the organization. So we want that partnership and welcome that feedback and those questions, because at the end of the day, we're striving towards the same end goal, that you provide a different perspective to there that we may miss. And we, again, back to welcome that. So ask the questions. That's one thing I like about when we bring on new folks in the organization, whether it's a temporary intern or someone, it's like, what is the art of the possible then? They don't know maybe what, again, that lens and that perspective. So let's have those conversations, because that you can't buy that perspective. And so getting that different, fresh perspective and different lens is critical.
I can tell you from my previous experiences, and I'm guessing some of the others, those organizations aren't looking back and saying, oh, I wish I would have had less quality assurance and challenge and risk management.
Yeah, that's not.
Right? Think of the big breaches, the big fines, the big reputational pieces, and they very seldomly wish they would have had less. Right?
Totally. I think the part that I joked about with Tim was, I would much rather you grill me about a question than go in front of Congress again.
How about again?
I mean, it's not ideal for you to be in those types of situations. It's much more ideal to be in the kitchen. We're all talking about it together. We're learning. We're trying to attribute it, not trying to catch a soundbite to throw up on CNN or something, right? So
I think our time is at 3:50. And I want to make sure that we get more questions. You're about to raise your hand, weren't you? Did I see you?
Oh, no.
All right. But I also want to take a perspective of, for our students, right? My son wants to be in cybersecurity, right? So what should they be thinking about? What skills? This kind of came up in one of our previous panels. But how do they? Where could security take them, even, right?
Well,
They're in risk. They're in classes about risk, and I'm guessing they're not talking a lot about cybersecurity.
right. Before we get too far into that, remember that there is a hairstyle for this field.
Yeah, okay.
We have to get
It's
that out.
trade-offs, you know.
Deputy CISO. You can make your own assumption. We don't know if it's causal. That's the problem.
Yeah, we're working
We
on
talk about it often.
dinner last night.
We're not sure. Do you have to get bald first before you get the job, or do you go bald after you? We don't know.
We'll continue debating.
Yeah.
It's a lot broader than it used to be. It used to be, running floppy disks around and putting patches on computers. It's a lot more complicated than that. It's a lot more diverse than that. What's really neat is the intersections that we're seeing within the business. So obviously ERM, our internal audit, internal controls, people that are coming out of the CPA field or the external audit field are interested in cyber. A lot of cross-pollination there. There's the governance side of it, the regulatory side of it, compliance. And then, of course, the really exciting red teaming exercises and things like that. So, really, really cool, fictional views of it, from hands-on keyboard to theoretical and more governance. It really runs the gamut.
Well, I think it's great because there's so many opportunities out there, and I know we have a partnership with Drake as we bring on folks for our technology association program where they get to rotate through different areas of our business for 6 months, 6 months, 6 months. And I would say, find out where you're passionate about and then find an area where you can get that in that company, because like Jake was saying, it's not just this one siloed thing anymore for cyber. It gets into this vast array of things, and so find something you've got an aptitude in, and then an area where you can align that passion, and there's a job out there for you. You just need to figure out where that's at, and there's so many opportunities now that I said didn't exist back in the day, not to date ourselves.
And I would say back to the technology question again, if you're a student now or talking to anybody that's in the teens, I think it's going to be significantly different than when we came up, because creativity is going to be the most important differentiator. If I look at what's different between people that are exceptional and not, it's great EQs with creativity towards a target with good IQs. And that's been a little bit of difference between a few generations where you could specialize. So if I'd given you advice, say 15 years ago, I might have said, you need to get a good skill set, specialize in this way, understand computer science, these things. That, I believe, is going to be a little less as AI takes a more commoditized view to the simple things. I don't know that I'm going to suggest to mentee kids get great in computer science if they don't know how to prompt well. So I'm probably going to tilt them more towards think through the dynamics of what is the world in your mind when it's right, better, and how would you say that to a machine that will articulate the common stuff for you. That's likely the advice I would give. And then echo, it's so broad now in the security field, you literally can do everything. You can do software development, you can do data and analytics, you can do business intelligence, you can do the GRC portions you said, all the way through to the defensive tactics. So you really can pick elements of a career that allow you to go everywhere. My only advice to them would be keep your options open. So make sure the things that you're picking don't pigeonhole you too much from being able to go in many different ways, many different places and scopes, because I think that's where technology is going to take us here pretty soon.
And I double down real quick on leverage resources that you have at your disposal here. There's great groups like SecDSM. There's some great clubs and areas here on Drake, and reach out and network, because we have a phenomenal amount of resource and talents where you can have the right critical conversations and ask the questions. And I think Jake said something last night of, don't be afraid to say yes. Explore, go outside your comfort zone. Fail fast now and get those opportunities and talk to your peers, talk to people who've done it, and find that so you can, again, get that diverse experience. And there's a lot of phenomenal local resources here.
Yeah, I'm going to close back up on that, because I think there are a couple key words that I want to pull through there. The critical thinking, I think, kind of was intertwined in both of their responses. Curiosity was obviously in there. Asking why, what if, and really, really focusing on the breadth not always the depth. Understanding and appreciating how your business operates can help you kind of see through scenarios that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise. But also within technology, cyber's a broad technology. We have to have a little bit of an understanding of data, of applications and systems and the core infrastructure underneath of that too. So breadth is also important with that curiosity.
Well, thank you very much. I think 350 was our target. The one thing I'll say is what a great, dynamic, well-spoken group, right? So I would also think about communications and the relationships that some of the other panels mentioned, those soft skills, right? How do you communicate complex things simply? Right? I think you can apply that to all of your coursework. You can apply it to your relationships, right? So simple communications and hair. Yeah, and hair, something with hair. But thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
I think there is I don't know if someone's going to make an announcement, but there is a social following. That is the first great opportunity and where you can say yes to some networking, right? So I've already offered up to a few students that if they want to reach out, I'll make connections for them with people that have interests in their field or in where they want to go. So say yes to social, and it is follow Kevin.
That way?
Yep. All right. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
Thank you all.
Thanks, gang.